Everyone in the North End knew never to look Angelo Rossi in the eye. If he walked into your business, you didn't just lose money, you usually lost your life. So when the most feared mob boss in the city walked into a failing diner on a rainy evening, surrounded by armed guards, everyone froze. He wasn't there for the pancakes. He was there to burn the place to the ground. But just as he raised his hand to give the kill order, his 6-year-old daughter, who hadn't spoken a word in years, tugged on his trench coat. She pointed a trembling finger at the terrified waitress and whispered one sentence. Just one sentence, and that sentence didn't just save the restaurant. It changed the history of the entire criminal underworld. Here is the full story of what really happened at Dawson's diner. The story begins on the gloomiest evening November had seen in a decade. We're talking about the kind of rain that doesn't wash things clean. It just makes the grime on the sidewalk stickier. The location was Dawson's Diner, a place that had seen better days. It sat on the corner of 4th and Oak, a neighborhood that was slowly being swallowed up by gentrification on one side and organized crime on the other. The neon sign outside flickered, the E in diner buzzing like a dying insect. Inside, Harper Quinn was scraping gum off the underside of table 4. Harper was 26, but her eyes looked 40. She had that specific kind of exhaustion that comes from working 2 jobs to pay for a nursing degree she never had time to study for and to support a sick aunt who raised her. Harper was beautiful in a quiet, unnoticed way. Messy brown hair tied back in a grease-stained scrunchie, hands roughened by bleach and hot water. She kept her head down. That was her rule for survival. Keep your head down, do the work, go home. But tonight, the tension in Dawson's diner was thicker than the clam chowder. The owner, Frank Dawson, was pacing behind the counter. Frank was a good man, a soft man, with a belly full of ulcers and a heart full of regret. He had borrowed money to fix the industrial freezer and pay off a health inspector. He borrowed it from a loan shark named Vito the Blade Marino. What Frank didn't know at the time was that Vito was a low-level enforcer for the Rossi crime family, and the Rossis didn't do payment plans. "Harper, you should go," Frank said, his voice trembling as he wiped a spot on the counter that was already clean. He checked his watch for the 10th time in a minute. "Please just close up early. I'll handle the register." Harper looked up, sensing the fear radiating off him. "Frank, I need the tips. Rent is due on Friday. Besides, who's coming in this rain?" "It's not customers I'm worried about," Frank whispered, his face pale and sweaty. "I missed the deadline." "Harper, Vito called this morning. He said the boss is coming personally. They're going to make an example out of the diner." Harper froze. Everyone knew who the boss was. Angelo Rossi, the man who supposedly ran the shipping yards, the unions, and the police force. They said he had ice water in his veins. They said he hadn't smiled since his wife died in a car bombing. "If they're coming," Harper said, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach, "then I'm not leaving you alone. You're 60 years old, Frank. I'm not letting you face a mob boss by yourself." "You don't understand," Frank hissed, tears welling in his eyes. "These men, they don't care that you're innocent. If you're here, you're collateral damage." Before Harper could argue, the bells above the front door didn't just jingle, they shattered. The front door was kicked open with such force that the glass pane cracked. The rain swirled in, bringing the smell of wet pavement and expensive cologne. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The air was sucked out. 3 men walked in first. They were huge, wearing dark raincoats that couldn't hide the bulges of shoulder holsters. They didn't look at Harper or Frank. They scanned the room, flipping the open sign to closed and pulling the blinds. Then he entered. Angelo Rossi. He was taller than the photos in the newspapers. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than the diner's annual revenue. His hair was slicked back, dark and severe, and his eyes were the color of steel. He was terrifyingly handsome, but it was the kind of beauty that a wolf has, predatory and lethal. But the most shocking thing wasn't the gun at his hip. It was what, or rather who, was holding his left hand. A little girl, maybe 6 years old. She was dressed in a pristine white coat and patent leather shoes, clutching a ragged, dirty stuffed rabbit that looked like it had survived a war. She had large dark eyes that darted around the room in panic. This was Lila Rossi, the Mafia princess. Why would a man bring his daughter to a shakedown? Rumor was, ever since her mother died, Lila had extreme separation anxiety. She screamed if her father left the room. Or maybe Angelo Rossi was just so arrogant that he didn't care if his child saw him destroy a man's life. Angelo let go of the girl's hand, gently gesturing for her to sit at the booth nearest the door. One of the guards, a brute named Bruno, stood over the child to protect her. Angelo walked to the counter. The sound of his Italian leather shoes on the linoleum floor was a rhythmic death march. Click, click, click. He stopped in front of Frank. Frank was shaking so hard the silverware on the counter rattled. "Mr. Dawson," Angelo said. His voice was smooth, deep, and terrifyingly calm. "Vito tells me you've been avoiding his calls." "Mr. Rossi," Frank stammered, I just need one more week. The bank is releasing the loan on—" Angelo didn't yell. He didn't scream. He simply reached out and swept the entire glass display of pies onto the floor. Crash. Cherry and apple filling splattered across the tiles, mixed with shards of glass. Harper gasped, jumping back. Angelo looked at her for the first time. His eyes narrowed. He looked at her like she was a bug on his windshield. "Get the girl out of here," he commanded his guard, pointing at Harper. "Take her out back and teach her not to witness business meetings." Harper's heart hammered against her ribs. She knew what teach her meant. The guard, a man with a scar running through his eyebrow, stepped toward Harper. He reached over the counter, his hand heavy and rough, grabbing her by the upper arm. His grip was bruising. "No!" Frank yelled, finding a sudden burst of courage. "She has nothing to do with this. Leave her alone." "Angelo." Rossi turned to Frank, his face a mask of annoyance. "You're in no position to negotiate, Frank. You borrowed $50,000. You paid back $5,000. In my world, that's theft." Angelo pulled a heavy, suppressed pistol from his jacket. He placed it on the counter. The metal clunked ominously. "I'm going to ask you one last time," Angelo said, unbuttoning his suit jacket. "Where is the money?" "I don't have it," Frank sobbed. "Then I take the business," Angelo said simply. "Bruno, start with the kitchen. Burn it." "No, please," Harper screamed, struggling against the guard holding her. This is his whole life. Angelo turned his cold gaze back to Harper. He walked around the counter, encroaching on her space. He smelled of rain, tobacco, and danger. He leaned in close, his voice a lethal whisper. "And you? You're very loud for someone who's about to be unemployed, or worse." He raised his hand. It was the signal. The guards pulled out lighters. The man holding Harper tightened his grip, dragging her toward the back alley door. "Daddy." The voice was small, rusty from disuse, but it cut through the tension like a knife. Angelo froze. His hand raised in the air stopped mid-motion. Everyone turned. The little girl Lila had slid out of the booth. She wasn't looking at her father. She wasn't looking at the guns. She was staring directly at Harper. Lila walked forward. The guard Bruno tried to stop her. "Lila, sweetheart, stay back." "Let her go," Lila said. Angelo turned slowly, his face pale. His men looked nervous. They knew the rumors. Lila hadn't spoken a full sentence to anyone but her father in years, not since the accident. "Lila," Angelo whispered, his voice losing its edge. "What did you say?" Lila walked right past her father. She walked right up to the guard holding Harper. She kicked the guard in the shin with her little patent leather shoe. Surprised, the guard let go. Harper stumbled back, rubbing her bruised arm, terrified and confused. She looked down at this little girl, this daughter of a monster. Lila looked up at Harper. The girl's eyes were wide, filled with a recognition that didn't make sense. She reached out a trembling hand and touched the fabric of Harper's cheap, stained apron. Angelo stepped forward, his gun lowered, but still in hand. "Lila, come away from her. She's nobody." Lila shook her head violently. She turned to her father, tears streaming down her face. She pointed at Harper, and then she spoke the sentence that would change everything. "Daddy, you can't hurt her. She's the lady from the locket." The silence that followed was absolute. Angelo Rossi dropped his gun. It hit the floor with a loud clatter that made Frank jump. But Angelo didn't even blink. He looked like he had been struck by lightning. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking less like a mob boss and more like a man seeing a ghost. "What?" Angelo breathed out. The word was barely audible. "The locket," Lila whispered, her voice gaining strength. "The one you cry over. The one in the safe. It's her." Angelo looked at Harper, really looked at her. He looked past the messy hair, past the grease stains, past the fear. He looked at the structure of her cheekbones, the shape of her eyes, the specific curve of her jawline. Harper was trembling. I don't know what she's talking about. I've never met you. I swear." Angelo moved toward her. This time there was no aggression. It was desperation. He reached into his own shirt, pulling out a silver chain. Attached to it was an antique heart-shaped locket. With shaking hands, he clicked it open. He held it up next to Harper's face. Frank gasped. The guards shifted uncomfortably. Inside the locket was a faded miniature photograph of a woman. She was smiling, wearing a sundress, standing in a field of sunflowers. It wasn't just a resemblance. It was a mirror image. The woman in the photo looked exactly like Harper Quinn, just clean and happy. "Who are you?" Angelo demanded, his voice cracking. "Who are you really?" "I'm just Harper," she cried, backing away until she hit the back wall. "I'm nobody. I'm from Ohio." "Liar!" Angelo roared, slamming his hand against the wall next to her head, boxing her in. "That photo is of my wife, Sophia. She died. So tell me, why do you have her face?" "I don't know." Harper wept. "I don't know." Lila tugged on Angelo's pant leg again. "Daddy, look." Lila pointed to Harper's neck. In the scuffle, Harper's uniform collar had been torn slightly. Exposed on her collarbone was a birthmark, a distinct reddish mark shaped almost perfectly like a crescent moon. Angelo stared at the mark. He staggered back, his legs giving out. He actually had to grab the counter to stop from falling. "Sophia had that mark," Angelo whispered. "Sophia, she's dead. I saw the body. I buried her." He looked at Harper with a mixture of horror and sudden violent hope. "Vito!" Angelo shouted, his voice booming through the diner. "Boss, forget the money. Forget the fire." Angelo stared intensely at Harper. "Close the diner. Lock the doors. Nobody leaves. Call the doctor. I want a DNA test kit brought here. If anyone tries to enter this building, shoot them." Harper's eyes went wide. "You can't keep me here. This is kidnapping." Angelo straightened up. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the iron will of the dawn. But his eyes were burning with a new obsession. "If you are who I think you are, then I haven't just kidnapped you, Harper. I found you." He turned to his men. "Get her a chair and get her something to eat. If she is Sophia, God help anyone who has touched a hair on her head." As Harper was forced into a chair, her mind racing, she looked at the little girl. Lila was smiling, a sad, hopeful little smile. But Harper wasn't Sophia. She knew she wasn't. She had memories of her childhood. She had a life. Or did she? Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through Harper's head. A flash of a memory that didn't feel like hers. A car exploding. Heat. Screaming. A voice whispering, "Run, Sophia, run!" Harper grabbed her head. The room spinning. Part 3 is going to reveal a secret that Harper herself didn't even know she was keeping. The narrator's voice cuts in because the DNA test is about to come back, and the results are not what anyone, not even Angelo Rossi, expects. The rain outside Dawson's diner had turned into a torrential downpour, hammering against the plate glass windows like 1,000 tiny fists trying to break in. But inside, the silence was louder than the storm. For a time, nobody moved. The diner, usually a place of clattering plates and sizzling bacon, had been transformed into a purgatory. Frank Dawson sat on a stool behind the counter, his head in his hands, too terrified to speak. The guards, Vito and Bruno, stood by the front and back exits, their hands never leaving their holsters. They were professional killers, men who had seen terrible things. But even they looked uneasy. They kept stealing glances at the woman sitting in booth number 4. Harper sat frozen. Her hands were wrapped around a mug of hot tea that Frank had shakily poured for her, but she didn't drink it. She couldn't stop staring at the reflection in the dark window. Sophia. She had seen the photo in the locket. It wasn't just a resemblance. It was her face. The same slightly crooked smile, the same arch of the eyebrow. Harper was trembling. Her hands were wrapped around a mug of hot tea that Frank had shakily poured for her, but she didn't drink it. She couldn't stop staring at the reflection in the dark window. Sophia. She had seen the photo in the locket. It wasn't just a resemblance. It was her face. The same slightly crooked smile, the same arch of the eyebrow. Eat, Angelo Rossi said. He was sitting across from her in the booth. He hadn't taken his eyes off her for a single second. He had removed his suit jacket, rolling up the sleeves of his white dress shirt. On his forearm, Harper noticed a tattoo, a date in Roman numerals, the day his wife died. "I'm not hungry," Harper whispered. Her voice felt foreign in her throat. "You're shaking," Angelo observed. His voice was no longer the boom of a mob boss. It was the quiet, intense rumble of a man trying to solve a puzzle that could destroy him. "Are you going into shock, or are you remembering?" "I have nothing to remember," Harper insisted, though her voice wavered. "My name is Harper Quinn. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. I moved here to take care of my Aunt Clara. I dropped out of nursing school because I couldn't afford the tuition. She recited the facts like a shield. These were the truths of her life. They had to be." Angelo leaned forward. The air between them crackled. "Dayton, Ohio," he repeated slowly, tasting the words. "Tell me about your house in Dayton. What color was the front door?" Harper opened her mouth to answer. "Blue. It was blue." But then she paused. Was it blue? Or had she just seen a blue door in a movie recently? She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to summon the image of her childhood home. She saw a porch. She saw a street. But the details were fuzzy, like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. "It was painted wood," she stammered. "You don't know," Angelo said softly. "It wasn't an accusation. It was a realization. You don't remember clearly, do you?" "I do," Harper snapped, her fear turning into defensive anger. I'm stressed. You have men with guns guarding the door." At that moment, the back door opened. A gust of wind and rain swept through the diner, making the napkins flutter. A short, balding man in a trench coat hurried in, clutching a black leather medical bag to his chest. He was soaking wet and looked like he might vomit from nerves. This was Dr. Marcus Hale, a man on the Rossi payroll. He didn't ask questions. He just stitched up bullet wounds and signed false death certificates. "Mr. Rossi," Dr. Hale gasped, wiping rain from his glasses. "I came as fast as I could." "Is that the kit?" Angelo asked, ignoring the pleasantries. "Yes, it's a rapid result DNA sequencer. Portable, highly accurate. We use it for paternity disputes, usually." "Use it," Angelo commanded. He pointed at Harper, "and then use it on Lila." The doctor approached the booth. Harper shrank back against the red vinyl seat. "It's just a cheek swab, miss," the doctor said gently, his hands trembling slightly as he opened a sterile package. "It won't hurt." Harper looked at Angelo. "Why are you doing this? Even if I look like her, people have doubles. It happens." "The birthmark," Angelo said, his eyes dropping to her collarbone. "The face, and Lila." He gestured to the end of the booth. The little girl Lila had curled up into a ball, clutching her dirty rabbit. She was fast asleep now, exhausted by the adrenaline. But even in her sleep, one of her small hands was reaching out, gripping the hem of Harper's apron. "She hasn't touched another human being in years," Angelo revealed, his voice cracking with a raw vulnerability that shocked Harper. "She doesn't let me hold her." She screams if the nannies get too close. But she touched you. She knows you. Harper looked at the sleeping child. A strange, warm ache bloomed in her chest. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. No, it couldn't be. She had never had children. She knew that. She opened her mouth. The doctor swabbed the inside of her cheek. Then he gently swabbed the sleeping child. "How long?" Angelo demanded. "The machine needs to process," Dr. Hale said, feeding the samples into a brick-sized device connected to a tablet. "Minutes, maybe an hour. Then we wait," Angelo said. He signaled to Vito. "Get the lady some brandy. She looks like she's going to faint." The next hour was the longest of Harper's life. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic beep of the DNA machine processing the data. Angelo didn't check his phone. He didn't pace. He sat opposite Harper, watching her hands. "You have a scar," he said suddenly, pointing to a faint white line on her left knuckle. Harper looked down. I burned myself on the oven last year." Angelo shook his head slowly. "No. Sophia got that scar when we were in Sicily. We were cooking. The oil splashed. I put the bandage on myself." Harper felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty room. "Stop it, please. You're trying to overwrite my memories with yours." "Tell me about the car crash," Angelo said abruptly. Harper froze. "What?" "And earlier," Angelo said, his eyes boring into hers. "When you looked at the locket, you grabbed your head. You flinched. What did you see?" Harper wanted to lie, but under his intense gaze, the lie died in her throat. I saw fire. I heard a noise, a boom. Sophia died in a car bomb." Angelo whispered. "Someone planted C4 under the chassis of her Mercedes. I was inside the house. I watched it happen from the window. The police said there was nothing left. They identified her by dental records, or what they thought were her dental records." Angelo leaned in across the table, his face inches from hers. "If you are her, then someone switched the bodies. Someone saved you, altered your memory, and hid you in a diner in the middle of nowhere." "Why?" Harper whispered. "Why would anyone do that?" "To punish me," Angelo said, "or to use you as leverage." Beep, beep, beep. The machine on the table let out 3 high-pitched electronic chirps. The silence in the room shattered. Dr. Hale jumped. He looked at the tablet screen. He adjusted his glasses. He squinted. Then he went very, very pale. He looked up at Angelo Rossi with fear in his eyes. Well, Angelo stood up. The air in the diner felt heavy, charged with electricity. "Mr. Rossi?" The doctor swallowed hard. "The probability of maternity, it's 99.9998%. The doctor turned the screen around. "She isn't a double," the doctor whispered. "Biologically speaking, this woman is Lila's mother." Angelo Rossi didn't scream. He didn't flip the table. He simply exhaled a long, shuddering breath that seemed to carry years of grief out of his body. He looked at Harper. The hardness in his face melted away, leaving a man who looked shattered by a miracle. "Sophia," he whispered. He reached out his hand slowly, as if she were made of glass. He touched her cheek. His fingers were warm, rough, and trembling. Harper didn't pull away. She couldn't, because when the doctor said the words 99.9%, something in Harper's mind broke. A wall she didn't know existed crumbled. The smell of rain, a man's laughter, this man's laughter, a little girl in a crib, a song about a star. Harper gasped, clutching her chest. "I can't breathe. Breathe, Sophia. Breathe," Angelo said, moving around the booth to sit next to her. He didn't grab her. He surrounded her, his presence a shield. "I've got you." "No." Harper pushed him away, panic rising like bile. "This doesn't make sense. If I'm her, who is Harper Quinn? I have a social security number. I have a lease. I have an aunt." She fumbled for her apron pocket. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped her phone twice before unlocking it. "I'm calling her," Harper cried hysterically. "I'm calling Aunt Clara. She'll tell you? She'll tell you I'm crazy." Angelo watched her, his expression darkening. Sophia had no living family. Her parents died when she was 20. "Well, I have an aunt," Harper screamed. She jabbed the contact labeled Aunt Clara. She put the phone on speaker and slammed it onto the table. Ring, ring, ring. The sound echoed through the silent diner. Everyone was watching the phone. Frank, the guards, the doctor, Angelo. Click. The call connected. Harper. The voice on the other end was female, elderly, and warm. It sounded exactly like the woman Harper had visited every Sunday for years. The woman who made her soup when she was sick. Aunt Clara. Harper sobbed, relief flooding her veins. "Aunt Clara, please. You have to help me. There are men here. They think I'm someone else. They think I'm a Mafia wife. Tell them. Tell them who I am." There was a pause on the line, a silence that lasted 1 second too long. When the voice came back, the warmth was gone. The elderly tremble was gone. The voice was flat, cold, and professional. "Code black," the woman said. "Asset has been compromised. Location." Harper froze. "What?" Angelo's eyes widened. He recognized that tone. He snatched the phone from the table. "Who is this?" Angelo barked into the phone. The voice on the other end changed again. It wasn't an old woman anymore. It sounded synthetic, distorted. "Hello, Angelo," the voice said. "It took you longer than we thought to find her. We expected you to check the diners in the North End." "You stole my wife," Angelo growled, his hand gripping the phone so tight the plastic creaked. "You let me bury an empty casket. You let my daughter stop speaking." "We gave Sophia a second chance," the voice replied calmly. "She was unhappy, Angelo. She wanted out. We just facilitated a transition. We wiped the slate clean. Harper Quinn is a good person, much happier than Sophia ever was." "You brainwashed her," Angelo spat. "We reprogrammed her for her own safety. But if she is speaking to you, then the experiment is over." "Who are you?" Angelo demanded. "The commission, the feds." "We are the ones who clean up your messes," the voice said. "But now Harper is a loose end, and we don't like loose ends." "If you touch her," Angelo said, his voice dropping to a demonic whisper, "I will burn this city down until I find you." "You're trapped in a diner, Angelo," the voice mocked. "Look out the window." Angelo looked up. Vito and Bruno looked up. Outside, in the pouring rain, across the street, a black van had pulled up. Then another, then a third. Men were pouring out of the vans. They weren't wearing police uniforms. They were wearing tactical gear, balaclavas, and carrying military-grade assault rifles. These weren't street thugs. This was a hit squad. "Say goodbye to Harper," the voice said. Click. The line went dead. "Get down!" Angelo roared. Crash! The front window of Dawson's diner exploded inward as the first canister of tear gas shattered the glass. Harper screamed, covering her head as glass sprayed over the booth. Lila woke up, shrieking in terror. "Vito! Bruno! Front and back!" Angelo shouted instantly, switching into war mode. He grabbed Harper and threw her to the floor, covering her body with his own. He scooped up Lila with one arm, pulling her under the heavy oak table. "Daddy?" Lila cried. "It's okay, baby, it's okay," Angelo said, pulling his gun. He looked at Harper. Harper was lying on the dirty linoleum, glass in her hair, looking at the man she had feared an hour ago. Now he was the only thing between her and death. "Who are they?" Harper yelled over the sound of gunfire erupting outside. "Who is my aunt?" Angelo checked the magazine of his pistol. "They are the people who stole your life," Angelo said. "And I'm the man who's going to kill every single one of them to get it back." Bullets began to shred the diner walls. Coffee cups exploded. The neon sign buzzed and died. Frank Dawson was cowering behind the counter. "I don't have insurance for this," he wailed. "Stay down," Angelo commanded. He looked at Harper one last time before the chaos truly began. "Harper, if we get out of this, you don't have to be Sophia. You don't have to be my wife. But you are Lila's mother, so fight. Fight for her." Harper looked at the little girl huddled against Angelo's chest. Lila reached out her hand again. Harper took it. And in that moment, the fear in Harper's heart turned into something else. A mother's rage. She looked around. She grabbed the only weapon she could find, a jagged shard of heavy glass from the broken pie display. "I'm not dying in a diner," Harper said through gritted teeth. Angelo grinned. It was a terrifying, blood-soaked grin. "That's my girl." The first canister of tear gas didn't just smoke. It hissed like a viper, spinning across the checkered floor and spewing a thick white cloud that smelled of pepper and sulfur. Eyes shut. "Don't rub them!" Angelo roared, his voice cutting through the ringing in Harper's ears. He ripped a piece of fabric from the tablecloth, dipped it into the pitcher of ice water on the table, and pressed it against Lila's face. "Hold this, baby. Don't let go." Harper watched him. The world was narrowing down to a tunnel of adrenaline. The diner, once a place of comfort, had become a kill box. The lights were out, shattered by the gunfire, leaving only the strobe light effect of muzzle flashes from the street and the headlights of the tactical vans cutting through the smoke. "They're coming through the front!" Bruno yelled from his position behind the overturned jukebox. His voice was tight, professional. He fired 2 shots blindly into the smoke. Bang! Bang! "Vito, the back." Angelo commanded. "Dr. Hale, get Frank into the freezer. It's airtight. It'll keep the gas out." Frank was sobbing, curled in a fetal position. The doctor grabbed him by the collar, dragging the heavy-set man toward the stainless steel door of the walk-in fridge. Harper tried to move, but her legs felt like lead. She was a waitress. She served coffee. She didn't do this. But as the white smoke billowed around her, blinding her, something strange happened. The panic that had been gripping her chest suddenly evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, mechanical calm. It was a sensation she didn't recognize, yet it felt intimately familiar. Her breathing slowed down. Her pupils dilated, adjusting to the darkness. She didn't think about doing these things. Her body just did them. A shadow loomed in the broken front window. A man in full tactical gear, black helmet, gas mask, body armor, stepped through the frame. Glass crunching under his heavy boots. He raised his rifle, scanning the room. He didn't see Angelo, who was crouched low behind the counter, but he saw Harper. He swiveled the barrel toward her. In that split second, Harper didn't scream. She didn't freeze. Without a conscious thought, Harper's right hand lashed out. She didn't throw the jagged shard of glass she was holding randomly. She threw it with the precision of a dart player hitting a bullseye. The glass flew through the air and struck the man in the small exposed gap between his helmet and his Kevlar vest, right in the soft tissue of the neck. The man gurgled, dropping his rifle to clutch his throat, and fell backward out of the window. Angelo turned, his eyes wide in the gloom. He had seen it. "Good throw," he grunted, but there was a flicker of fear in his eyes. He wasn't looking at a waitress anymore. Harper looked at her hand, horrified. "I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize," Angelo snapped, grabbing her arm and pulling her low as a hail of bullets chewed up the booth they had just been sitting in. Upholstery foam exploded into the air like snow. "You just bought us seconds." "Boss, we can't hold the front," Bruno shouted. "There's too many of them, at least a dozen heat signatures moving in." "The alley," Angelo said. "Vito, is the car clear?" "Alley is clear, but they're flanking," Vito yelled from the kitchen. Angelo looked around. He saw the industrial stove. He saw the gas line. "Vito, give me your lighter," Angelo said. Vito tossed it. Angelo turned to Harper and Bruno. "When I say go, you run. You run to the black SUV parked 3 spots down. Bruno, you drive. Harper, you get Lila in the middle seat and you stay down." "What about you?" Harper asked, her voice trembling. I'm going to create a distraction. Angelo moved to the stove. He kicked the gas pipe until it bent and hissed. The smell of natural gas began to mix with the tear gas. Go, Angelo roared. He lit a napkin and threw it toward the stove, then dove out the back door. Harper didn't look back. She sprinted into the rain, clutching the gun in one hand and grabbing Lila's coat with the other as Angelo passed the child to her. Boom. The kitchen of Dawson's diner erupted. The blast blew the back door off its hinges and sent a fireball rolling into the alleyway. The force of the explosion knocked the two snipers on the opposing roof off balance. Move! Move! Bruno screamed, shoving Harper toward a sleek armored Cadillac Escalade parked in the shadows. Harper threw the door open and dove inside, dragging Lila with her. Bruno jumped in the driver's seat. Vito jumped in the passenger side. Where's Angelo? Harper screamed, looking out the rain-streaked window. The alley was filled with smoke and fire. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then a figure emerged from the flames. Angelo Rossi. His expensive suit singed, his face streaked with soot, running with the intensity of a demon. He was firing behind him, suppressing the operatives trying to follow through the fire. He reached the car. He wrenched the back door open and threw himself in beside Harper. Drive, Angelo yelled. Bruno slammed the accelerator. The heavy SUV roared to life, tires spinning on the wet pavement before catching grip. They fishtailed out of the alley, just as bullets sparked against the bulletproof glass of the rear window. The silence inside the SUV was heavy, broken only by the aggressive hum of the engine and the rhythmic thump-thump of the windshield wipers fighting the storm. They had been driving for a time. Bruno was taking a convoluted route, weaving through the industrial district, doubling back under bridges to ensure they weren't being tailed. In the back seat, the adrenaline was beginning to crash, leaving behind a cold, shaking exhaustion. Lila was awake, but silent. She was curled up on Harper's lap. It was an instinctual position for the child, seeking the safest place she knew. And terrifyingly, the safest place she knew was Harper. Harper looked down at the child. She smoothed Lila's dark curls away from her forehead. Her hand was steady now. Is everyone hit? Angelo asked, his voice gravelly. He was checking a graze on his arm, wiping blood away with a handkerchief. Clean, Vito said from the front. Clean, Bruno echoed. Angelo turned his head slowly to look at Harper. The streetlights flickered over his face, casting long shadows that made him look older, wearier. You, Angelo said. Harper flinched. She looked down at her hands. She was still holding the 9mm pistol. Her finger was indexed along the slide, perfectly safe, perfectly professional. She hadn't even realized she was holding it properly. She dropped the gun onto the floor mat as if it were a venomous snake. I don't know how I did that, Harper whispered. The man in the window, I saw the gap in his armor. I didn't think. You hit the jugular notch, Angelo said quietly. It's a vulnerable point about 2 inches wide. Most soldiers can't hit that with a knife, let alone a piece of broken glass from 15 feet away. He leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. Sophia was trained by the Mossad before she met me. Her father was a diplomat with connections. She spoke 4 languages. She could disassemble a Glock blindfolded. He opened his eyes and looked at her. You aren't a waitress, Harper. You never were. But I remember, Harper insisted, tears welling up. I remember my prom. I remember failing my driving test. I remember my first dog. Buster. Implants, Angelo said. Hypnotic suggestion, false memories. The people who took you, Aunt Clara and her crew, they are professionals. They built a cage inside your mind and locked Sophia in the basement. Harper shook her head violently. No, that's sci-fi stuff. That's not real. We just had a shootout with a paramilitary death squad in a diner, Angelo pointed out dryly. Real left the building an hour ago. Harper's phone, which sat on the rusty metal table, buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a text message. Angelo reached for it, but Harper was faster. She picked it up. The screen glowed in the dim light. Unknown number. Bring the girl to the Pier 4 warehouse by midnight, or we release the gas in the safe house vents. You have time, Harper. Be a good girl. Angelo read the message over her shoulder. His face went white. He looked up at the air vents running along the ceiling. Vito? Bruno? Angelo shouted. Check the ventilation intake now. It's a bluff, Harper said calmly. Angelo looked at her, stunned. We can't take that risk. We have to move. It's a bluff, Harper repeated, her voice dropping an octave, becoming husky and commanding. Evelyn, Clara, is arrogant. She thinks she's talking to the waitress. She thinks she's talking to the scared little mouse who served pancakes. Harper walked over to the table where the weapons were laid out. She picked up the 9mm pistol again. She racked the slide, the metallic click-clack echoing through the empty factory. She turned to Angelo. Her posture had changed. She stood taller. The slouch of the waitress was gone, replaced by the lethal grace of a woman who had once been trained by the Mossad. Harper is gone, Angelo, she said. Angelo stared at her. For the first time in years, he saw his wife. Truly saw her. Sophia, he whispered. She wants a meeting at Pier 4, Harper said, checking the magazine. Fine, we'll go to Pier 4. It's a trap, Angelo warned. They'll have a kill team waiting. Harper walked up to him. She reached out and straightened his collar, her fingers brushing the pulse in his neck. I know it's a trap, she said, a dark, dangerous smile playing on her lips. But they're expecting a waitress and a grieving widower. She turned toward the door, her eyes burning with a mother's rage. They aren't expecting us. Harper Quinn walked out the door, but she didn't walk like a waitress. She walked like a queen returning to claim her kingdom. The war had begun, and God help anyone who stood in her way. And that is where we have to leave it for today. Can you believe that transformation from a terrified waitress scraping gum off tables to a lethal assassin ready to take down a shadow government agency, all because of one sentence from a little girl? It turns out the strongest force in the world isn't the Mafia, and it isn't fear. It's a mother's instinct. Harper didn't just remember who she was, she chose who she needed to be. But now the real question remains. Can Angelo and Harper actually survive the ambush at Pier 4? And what secrets are buried in that black ledger that are worth killing for? If you want to see part 2 of this story and find out what happens at the warehouse, you need to destroy that like button right now. Let's aim for likes on this video. If we hit that goal, I will drop the sequel where Harper and Angelo take the war to Aunt Clara. Also, comment the word locket down below if you think Harper's memory is fully back or if there are still secrets hiding in her mind. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the showdown.